20 of Talk That Talk, Season 2. I'm your host, Fallon Stokes, and we have a special guest today. We have Barry Gibbons, a techie entrepreneur and doing big time things in Atlanta with the tech industry, especially dealing with people of color. So welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today, Barry.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be. Long time coming.
I know, long time coming. Glad I'm able to catch up with you. I know you're a very busy man. But let's just jump right in and get to it. So you are one of the managing partners for Collab Capital, a business that's based here in Atlanta. You guys are providing capital or assisting startup businesses to assist them in getting capital to get their startups off the ground, continue to grow and develop, and giving a lot of guidance to some young entrepreneurs in the community. You're a Georgia Tech graduate, graduated in 2008. That's pretty much how I met you, with our tech connections and hooping, playing basketballs and recreational ball. But,
Yes,
just trying to catch up with you and see what you've been up to. So I want to just talk about a little bit about your journey in from when you were growing up. Where are you born and raised? Where are you from?
Yeah. So, my Grady babies don't like when I say I'm from Atlanta. I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I moved to Atlanta when I was 8, 9 years old.
Gotcha.
So moved down here for my dad is trying to find better opportunities, for his family. And so moved me and my older brother to stay down here. Best decision. I still thank my parents to this day, and we can get into why Atlanta's so special in a little bit. But grew up in Stone Mountain, went to Stone Mountain High, and then obviously went on to go to Georgia Tech. So Atlanta's just been near and dear to me. This whole area, all the Metro Atlanta's been near and dear to me since I was a little kid.
Awesome. So growing up here in Atlanta, you decided to go to Georgia Tech. What schools were you had in the mix to decide where you wanted to attend? You wanted to major in mechanical engineering. So tell us about why you chose Georgia Tech.
Yeah, so this was a weird journey for me. I didn't think, like, it's weird, like growing up, you don't think you're gonna get into Georgia Tech, right? Even though I had like a 4.0 GPA, right? I was in National Honor Society, top 10% of my class, like all this stuff. I had I don't even remember my SAT score. This shit was super high. I literally scored a perfect score in the math section of the SAT. The language arts section was a little different, but my math score did enough to make up for it. But so I started looking elsewhere, right? So I looked at Clemson. I looked at Georgia Tech has this dual degree program. So I looked at Armstrong Atlantic, which is a feeder school out in Savannah. So me and my mom drove down to Savannah and looked at that campus. And one of the big decisions for me, my older brother went to Morehouse. And so one of the big decisions for me was, do I go to an HBCU? And I met a teacher of mine, and she was going over pros and cons. She actually she was at Georgia Tech long before we got there. But went through the pros and cons. And one of the things that we looked at was, like, I had literally never been around white people, my entire life. So my high school we had maybe 2 or 3, I'm probably missing a couple, but like less than 10 black people in all 4 grades. And more than half of those black people had grills and drove Impalas, right? They both, they drove Chevy Caprices, right? It was, so it was that type of environment. And so I actually applied and got into North Carolina A&T. I didn't apply to FAM, but I just couldn't do an HBCU. I was like, if I really want this different experience, I really want to go to a school that's going to kind of, and I know, and it's not saying HBCUs don't prepare you, but like I had the culture, right? Like I needed to see what was it like in the other side, in the rest of the world. Like, and that's one of the things about growing up in this bubble in Atlanta. Like, you get that culture. And I know we'll get into this a little while about how I got on my journey, but you don't get that discrimination in that, like, you're taught that you can be whatever. So I had never dealt with anything like the stuff I dealt with once I got to Georgia Tech and once I started my tech career. And so that's why I chose Georgia Tech. Like I said, I was planning on doing it through Armstrong Atlantic, and I applied, got a couple of recommendation letters from some Georgia Tech graduates.
Right.
And lo and behold, I actually got in on early decision.
Wow.
So not only did I get in, But I got in on early decision. And then I also just did some random stuff. So like I applied to like Harvard and Yale and all these other schools, pretty much just to say I could do it.
Right.
And I ended up getting into like 3 Ivy League schools, some other stuff. And then my counselor at my school, she had found like all these grants, so I didn't have to pay for my college applications. And so yes, I was just like sending in applications
Why not?
just to brag. And so, but like I said, best decision I ever made was making that decision to go to Georgia Tech, though.
Okay. So once you get accepted into Georgia Tech and you start, you just mentioned that a little bit. Talk about that experience and what you had to endeavor, being a black man, a young black man at that, and a predominantly white school in a predominantly white, program, mechanical engineering. It's not too many people that look like you in that program. So talk about your experiences when you were in school at Tech.
I know I just said like the exact opposite, but my experience at Tech was black as hell, right? It was like you just couldn't run away from it, right? It was like first week of school, where do you go, right? I'm in the gym every single day. Like I'm on the basketball court. That's where I met, people like Omari and Ant and like, Fred, like all these people. Like I met Fred later on in the gym because they were in football season, but most of the people that I met like first week of school on campus were in that gym. And then the second thing was I crossed Kappa as a freshman.
Okay.
And so right off the bat, and I went to Challenge, right? So all of my friends coming in, I went to the Challenge program. So everybody was black and or Latino coming into Georgia Tech. So those are the people I was walking around campus with, met a bunch of more black people in the gym. And then I started hanging around a bunch of Greeks, which obviously is still all black people, right? And so coming into Tech for me, like initially I didn't see it, even though I went to this all white school because everybody that I was around was black. And then you get into classes. And then that's when you start to see everything, right? So you get into classes and it's always like, maybe 2 or 3 of us, you've been there, it's 2 or 3 of us in the class. We click up and we like, how the hell are we going to get through this joint? Like, what do we have to do? And so that's when I started branching out and really starting to like understand other people's cultures, starting to learn about other people's cultures and really learn how to communicate with people that, didn't have the same background as me. And so I started going to the white frat parties and hanging out with, people that didn't come from the same background. And you start learning some things, right? You were learning around this thing called Word, right? And it's basically all the old tests that all these fraternities, predominantly white fraternities and sororities have just sitting in their house. And these professors aren't even changing the tests. And so you're going and asking them like, hey, y'all studying? What y'all doing? And they're like, oh, no, we already got the answers to the test. Like, we good. Let alone, the 2 to 4 black people in the class. We at the library, we going to the gym at, 4 o'clock to catch the run. But after we take a shower, like we're in the library until 2 in the getting ready for a test. And they threw a frat party. Right. And it's like, and then you come back and like we bust our ass and we all had good, people in my program that kind of grew up in the mechanical engineering program with, we all graduated with decent grades. But you look at like that work ethic that it took to push through it for us to get there. That's when you really started to see like some people just have, not that they're not smart, not that they're not capable, but some people just have tools and access that we don't have. And it's not to say that they couldn't have done it without the tools and the access, but the fact of the matter is that they have the tools and the access. So we'll never even know. Right. But what we do know is that some of us made it without the tools and the access, but then a lot of us didn't. And, and then you start to look at graduation rates and things like that. And you start to wonder if the other side didn't have the tools and the access, like, what does this whole spectrum look like? And it starts to make you think that the data is really, really skewed because, people we're playing on different fields. And so that's when I really started to see just what it means to have networks, to have access, to have those different relationships. And it really started teaching me like, not only do I need to have those relationships over there, but how the hell do we build this over here for us? Right. Like, how do we make sure that we have Word? Like I started saving all my tests and passing them down. Right. Like, how do we make sure that the next class in physics 2, how do we make sure that they have all my notes? And how do we make sure that they know who to talk to and they need to study? And so that's when I really started shifting into like this. We have to figure out like, because we're not always going to be accepted into that world. Like they're not just going to give up everything that their ancestors and their previous friends and colleagues had. They're not just going to give that up to everybody. And so if that's not the case, then instead of complaining, how do we build that internally for the Black students at Tech? And so that's when we started getting into a whole bunch of stuff. But that was kind of my first early. And then, oh man, I forgot this story. Another, my freshman year at Tech, I had a Pontiac, white Pontiac Grand Dam that I wasn't supposed to have on campus, but that joint had 2 15s in the trunk, and it was.
You knew East Siders, man, from the East Side.
Like, right, you knew it was coming. You could hear it coming. And so my best friend came to visit with a couple other buddies, and we riding around. And so they also have cars that are loud, right?
That's a beat in the trunk.
And, I'm the only Georgia Tech student out of the crew, and their car actually gets pulled over by the Georgia Tech police. Guns drawn, like, get out of the car, get out of the fucking car. Like, so I'm seeing my friends, they down like on the pavement, like, wow. And it was the normal, mistaken identity, driving around, 3 black kids,
loud music.
Loud music. Now they was doing some stuff that, we teenagers, right? We young, we college students, right? It's nothing crazier than any of the white kids, right? It's like we're being college students. And that was my first ever experience with police. Like, up until that point, I had 1 speeding ticket. Like, that I got the day after I got my driver's license, I got a speeding ticket. and that was the only time I ever had a confrontation, like, with non-school related, like, resource officer, police type people.
Right.
But that was the first time. And it was like, so it all just kind of got dumped on me that freshman year in Tech. And that's one of the reasons I really joined the fraternity, was like, I need to build my networks up, right? Mm-hmm. I need to figure out how to get into some of these circles, how to build, because my family, I don't have those networks internally. And so I'm rambling, but I'll let you ask the next question. But
no, that's so important. We talk about that all the time. I think networking is the most important thing you can do, because it's not always what you know, it's really who that can put you in the right position that you don't even expect. So you're at Georgia Tech, freshman year, you're in this rigorous program at Tech, mechanical engineering. You have these encounters of dealing with race and the inequities that Black students at Tech had compared to your white counterparts, just explaining that. But talk about, you able to start your first startup in college. Talk a little bit about that, and how during your busy college schedule, you were able to start a startup. and it's actually a successful startup. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually can't take any of the credit for this one.
Okay.
So, I was there, but the idea was all Omari's, right? Like, at this point, I was actually and I'm saying these names, I know you know them, but I know the audience has no clue who these people are. But at the time, I was actually living on Aunt and Omari's couch. Okay. And I think they were in, I don't even remember the name. They were either in Center Street or ULC, one of the two. I forgot which one it was. And Omari started talking about, like, painting these tennis shoes. And then this was either Rio's freshman or junior year. And Rio was kind of a sneakerhead. And so, it just became this thing where, we were actually, like, more focused on, like, the t-shirt side of the business. And so, but we just knew we wanted to, like, custom make stuff.
Right.
And it was really Omari's idea. Then Rio kind of came along. And so we just started doing this stuff just kind of as something we're doing in our dorm room. None of us really knowing anything about starting businesses or what the hell we were doing. And so then Omari painted this, like, really dope purple pair of slushy kicks, right? And we put them in this boutique, and they got picked up by a big boy right before he dropped his I Got That Perp album. And so we started getting calls like, hey, man, somebody made y'all shoes, like Big Boy on 106 and Park with some shoes that look like y'all's. And so, like, we turned on 106 and Park, and lo and behold, Big Boy had went into that boutique and bought the purple sneakers that Omari made. And from there, it was just like, oh, crap, like, we can really make money doing this, right? But we need more people because it take hella long to make these shoes. And so Omari's brother started painting shoes. You know, our homeboy Ty, he's deep into the basketball circles. He's been a hooper his whole life. And so he knew how to get to like the LeBron Jameses. And so like we ended up getting like LeBron, Carmelo, Carlos Boozer, like through the boutique. We had T.I., Jagged Edge, did a snowman pair for Jeezy. Jazzy Faye probably has a whole wall of like shell toe Adidas that we custom painted for him. And so it was just like, we just started, and this was MySpace was popping too. It's like Rio was managing the MySpace page. And so it was just a cool ass journey, man. Like made, you know, not enough money to, you know, say that we had a $1 million business. The most important thing that we all learned from that journey though was, you know, we actually started a blog called Money is Just an Idea, right? Like, if you have an idea and you go execute on something and you go do it well, and like, it doesn't have to be right? It doesn't have to be perfect. But if you go out and just start doing something, that you can make a little bit of money, right? So like for college students putting, you know, 5-10 grand in your pocket, like that's no chump change, right?
No.
For a broke college student.
Right.
And so it really just literally, it like catapulted us onto this journey. We ended up like driving. I'm still mad about the shit to this day. Like I just got my BMW and they made me drive it all the way to New York from Atlanta. But I just got my BMW, so we drove it up to New York to meet with Damon John. And the craziest part, I couldn't even go in the meeting because Damon John said he didn't like to have too many people in the meeting because it felt overwhelming. So we'd only pick 2 people, and obviously like Rio is the sneakerhead, and then Omari is kind of it was his idea from the beginning. And so I'm just kind of the business guys. I'm just like, all right, I wait outside, right? So I drive my car.
And I wait outside.
And then I went outside, and it didn't end up going anywhere, but it just, like I said, it drove home that drive, right? Like if you go out and you really like do something and put your mind to it and push something forward, like you can actually make a living without having to wait on someone to hire you, without having the best resume. Like none of us were shoe designers.
Right.
But we had our shoes on people's feet that most shoe designers probably want to get to.
Right.
Right. And we're engineering students at Georgia Tech, right? And we're not in SCAD or anything like that. And so it just showed that you don't have to be the best. You don't have to have the knowledge from the beginning. Like, if you have an idea, just go do that shit, right? And you'll see what happens. It's not always going to work. Like, that didn't turn out to be a multi-million-dollar idea, but it was more than enough than we needed as college students. And that's really what sparked really all of our journeys into like being entrepreneurs, starting businesses, and living on this side of the fence.
Okay. So we're going to fast forward. You graduate from tech, and then you come out, you get your first job. And I think I read you were working with John Deere as an engineer. Was that your first job out of school? Okay.
Yep.
Talk about that experience in having to work for, you know, a Fortune 500 company. Again, you're going into an arena where it's not too many people that look like you as an engineer. And that experience of what you learned and how it helped you to make the leap to become an entrepreneur when you made the decision.
Yep. The main thing that I focused on when I was in corporate was how to manage, right? Like I didn't know how to manage people. So I kind of really paid attention to how do people do like, you know, quarterly reports and like performance reviews, and like, how do you hire people? Like, what does that process look like? Because when I went into that job, I didn't even apply for it. Like I was already in an entrepreneurial brain. I didn't do one interview for a full-time job when I graduated. Wow. Like, because me, Omari, and Rio, we were like, after that, you know, Slushy Kicks, it was like, we're going to keep doing this. Like, we're going to start more businesses. We had started doing investments in the stock market. You know, Mari's still doing it to this day. You know, we had started looking at like, could we buy businesses or could we start? Like, what could we do? And we literally told ourselves we were just going to do this full time. And me and Omari had a house off campus at the time. And my old boss, because I interned at John Deere, and my old boss called me and was like, I heard you're about to graduate. You know, I want to send you something. Like, what's your address? And the something that he sent me was a $90,000 job offer. Like, I didn't even apply for the job.
Man, that's amazing. That tech degree, boy. Woo!
Man, he sent it to me, and they had like a relocation bonus. And I was like, I'm moving from Atlanta to Augusta. Y'all giving me $10,000? Like, I don't even have shit, right? Like, I'm graduating from college. Like, I got my car. and a couple things of clothing, and I'm about to put this shit in the trunk and drive an hour and a half to Augusta and put $10K in the bank, right? So it was really like $100,000 for me. And so I couldn't say no to that, but I went into it with the mindset that I was only going to work for 12 months. And I told, Rio and them, I was like, I got to take this money. Like, my dad don't make this much money. I got to go take this $100,000 off the books. And then I'm just going to save all of it. Right. And so I did that. I had a like $600 rent. The same best friend that met me at Georgia Tech lived in Augusta. He moved in with me and paid half of it. I was only paying like $600 in bills, making $100,000. Right. Well, I had a BMW at the time.
Yeah,
so, which is a horrible decision. I had my car note, but that was a horrible decision. But yes, I went into it with that mindset of like, what do I need to get out of this job? Because I know I'm leaving in 12 months. And so obviously journeys change, stories change. I ended up meeting my wife. She got pregnant. So instead of moving to Atlanta, I moved to Durham. Mm-hmm. But in that same time frame, well, it was 2009, right? And so we were also going through the financial crisis.
Oh, yeah.
And that's when all the cuts were happening. And so they put out that we were doing voluntary layoffs at John Deere. And I was like, let me see that. I was like, how much I get? Like? And they were like, if you've been here less than 5 years, you only get 1 month's salary. And I'm like, that's not worth it. Mm-mm. Because, I'm gonna stay until until December. I'm gonna get my full, January to January salary. And so next thing you know, my boss shows up with a 5-year anniversary cake. And I get my 5-year John Deere gift. Because if you co-op, not intern, you actually go on a leave of absence from your job. You're not an intern, right? So all through college, I was actually a full-time employee at John Deere because I started interning for them the summer after my freshman year. So for my third month in my full-time role, I celebrated 5 years with John Deere. So then I went and looked back at the paperwork, and they're like, you were there for 5 years, you get 6 months of pay.
Ooh.
I was like, man, I called my HR rep so fast. I was like, is this true? Like, am I really 5 years? Do I get 6 months? And so I ended up leaving John Deere. Instead of staying to December, I ended up leaving in September, but I got paid all the way through March, technically, because I got severance for taking the package. And so, they weren't pissed, but like they had kind of high aspirations for me at John Deere. Like, I was up and coming kind of black upstart. They didn't have a lot of black people there. They wanted to like send me to Duke to pay for my MBA, do an executive MBA, which stuff you got to be there like 15 years to get.
Right.
And I'm having these conversations in year one. And so I'm like, I told my boss, I was like, I can't pass this up, right? Like I get 6 months, like my wife's about to have a baby, like, or girlfriend at the time was like, I'm about to move to Durham. I'm about to start this real estate startup. And so I used that money to get my first, it wasn't what me, Omari, and Rio had planned. I had grown up a bit, had a baby on the way. So I had to change up a little bit, but I was still in that entrepreneurial realm. And so moved to Durham, where my wife was at medical school at Duke. And started my real estate company.
Now, so transition to this real estate company, because I didn't even know that was the next thing you did. I thought it was Monsieur, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But
yeah,
so you leave John Deere and you decide you want to use this money you got from like severance package.
Yep.
To go ahead and start your next startup. So what was this idea with real estate?
So I loved real estate. So one of the things that we had broken up with me, Omari, and Rio was like Omari was the stock guy. Like Rio was going to be like the do we buy businesses guy. And I was the real estate guy. So I had already been like getting deep into real estate, learning like reading every book I could possibly read about real estate investing. I thought that was my journey. And so when I moved to Durham, I was like, if I'm not going to invest in real estate, like I think there's a company I can still start. I was like, it's super hard to buy houses. All this technology, like, DocuSign was coming out, iPads were becoming really popular. And I'm like, there has to be a better way to like purchase a house versus this old antiquated way. And so basically I moved to Durham with this idea that I was going to like change real estate purchasing. And so I actually went and got my realtor's license first.
Okay.
So that I can this is something I've done in every business. I get deeply entrenched in the industry. And so I went and took all my tests, got my real estate license, sold houses and was really just trying to learn And what I wanted to do, instead of sell my technology to a brokerage, what I wanted to do is I want to start my own brokerage so I can actually test everything out.
Right.
I'll be lying if I said I did that just for my company, because I also like been killing it. So I was like the silver associate. I was like the second best associate, at Coldwell Banker at the time.
Uh-huh.
And I used to see those checks, and they took like 50% of all my checks whenever I sold a house. And I mean, you're talking about like 50, 60 grand. And I'm like,
Dang.
I'm gonna do this shit on my own, right? Like, right. And so I went in, but you had to work for a year before you can go become a broker and start your own.
Okay.
And so I sold real estate for a year, and during that time, I did everything without building my own technology. And so, like, I was doing DocuSign. I was literally doing Skype instead of like building a virtual a virtual visit software myself, which I didn't even know how to do at the time. I would just tell people like, hey, I do this virtual visit, and I would go to the house without them having to move or having to drive there. And I would literally walk around the house like this with my iPad and show them the house, which was great because, that's a college town. And so you had a lot of people moving there for medical school and business school. They needed to buy houses, but they were still in school. So they didn't want to make those trips. A lot of them, at least. So I would just drive to the houses, show them the house. And so I just thought I was like cutting edge. I was doing DocuSign before it was even legal to do real estate transactions digitally. It hadn't even passed that was legal yet. And so here I am on the cutting edge. And I quit the firm to go start my own firm called Dream Realty with a buddy of mine, Joey, and just wasn't ready. Like literally burned through. I went and got an office, like just made literally every mistake you make as a first time. Kind of like, because Slushy Kicks was like a mistake. This was like the first time I went out and like went out and did it intentionally. And so I went out and got an office. I went and bought like all these iPads. I went and bought all these like Dream Realty house signs. I blew through like 25, 30 grand just to get it off the ground.
Right.
And not knowing how much I was making, most of my money was coming off selling real estate and how much the Coldwell Banker name meant for people to choose me. I'm just cocky thinking, everybody want me to be their realtor. And a lot of it was the fact that I was with Coldwell Banker. It's that trust. They have the back end. And so I ended up not even having the cash to build the technology I needed to build. In essence, I should have used that 30 grand instead of getting the office. I should have used it to actually pay a developer, build what I needed to build, start the business, and or build the tools I needed. Instead, I went and bought all this showy stuff, right? All the sexy stuff on the outside of the business. And I didn't build what I really needed to operate and make revenue with the business. And so it was like my first lesson, like the flashy shit don't matter. Like, does your product work and does it sell? You shouldn't buy anything. You shouldn't be making any big purchase or anything unless it's feeding, when you're that early, unless it's feeding into, does the product work? Will somebody buy it? Right? Like, if you don't have a product to sell. And so basically I went on trying to continue to sell real estate, didn't have any more cash, had burned through everything, and hit a point where I was like, you know what? Like, am I really passionate? Do I want to keep pushing this? My wife was graduating from medical school. She was about to start residency. And so, I was like, hey, I think I want to go back to Atlanta. Like, I need to, and I think I want to leave this here. Like, I don't think I want to take this to Atlanta. She was looking at Morehouse to do residency. So I ended up just shutting it down, leaving that part of my life in Durham, and moved back to Atlanta, where my wife started residency at Morehouse School of Medicine. And then I actually went back to work too, with kind of that same premise of, I'm going to work 12 months. At this time, though, I didn't have my idea. So I was like, I'm going to work 12 months. So I got a job at Caterpillar, which is crazy, with the John Deere to Caterpillar. And I did the same exact thing. I was working there, and I know this is a segue into, I had like 6 ideas that I just went back and forth on, doing all the diligence on them. Like, is this something I want to do? Is it something I have the skill set and the network to do? And do I believe it's a viable business idea? And am I passionate about it? Okay. And so I had like 6 different ideas that I was going through. And the idea that one ended up, it was at the time, it was called iBar Innovations, the kind of like iRobot.
Yeah.
It was the iBar. So the company was iBar Innovations, and I just started working on Monsieur in my garage. And that's, I know you want to ask a question. That was kind of the segue into.
So Monsieur was incredibly successful. Talk about that. So that's your first real successful startup, I'm assuming, since you really ventured out on your own. So what was all those experiences you took with you to start this startup. Why was it so successful for you in this technology? You were able to finally sell this technology to, venues and, let them do it, but make money off of your idea.
One, I spent the time and money this time on building the product.
Okay.
Right. So before I ever told anybody that I was doing, I just had the job at Caterpillar to the outside world.
Okay.
But internally at home, I was literally getting off work and going to Home Depot, like with the idea in my head of like, how would I build this? Like, I know I want to do this thing, but like, and I was literally like building it out of Home Depot, like pipes, wood, like what tools do I need to buy? And then when things got a little deeper, there were other things like McMaster-Carr place where you can buy pumps. And so when they got some of the more technical stuff, you can't get at Home Depot. But it was literally me spending all of my time and the extra money that I had on buying parts. We had to get a patent. So like, paying. So all of these things before anybody even knew what I was doing. And the first person I really told about outside of my family was my fraternity brother, Eric. And because I needed a developer, like I'm a mechanical engineer, so to this day, I still don't write code. I can do a little bit, but not enough to say I write code. And so I knew how to build the mechanical mechanism. Like I knew how to make a drink pour. Like I could do a little bit on the circuit board from an electrical engineering perspective. But I was like, I really need an electrical engineer. Like even if they're just a contract, just to come help me build out the circuitry, because what I have right now is too simple. It needs to be better. And I need a software developer to come in and write the interface. Right. Like, and also to build a back-end database to house all the drink recipes and all that stuff. And so I knew Eric was a electrical engineer. At least I knew that's what he graduated. I hadn't talked to him in a while. And so I hit him up, and lo and behold, he was actually in grad school at Georgia Tech getting his master's in computer science. Wow. So not only did he have the electrical engineering background, but he also was learning how to write code, right? And the type of code that I needed to be written. And so ended up going to his house, pitching him, or like a lot of people don't know, like you're always pitching your business. Even when you're bringing on employees and or co-founders, like you have to be able to sell it when it's nothing. And so that was like the first person I ever pitched on like what Monsieur could actually be. It was like I had this iBar Innovations thing, and we can sell it to people's homes, and we can sell it to hotels. This joint's gonna be huge. I just need somebody to help me write this code. Like already, so like you're literally coming up with a business plan, kind of selling it. And he was like, "Bet, let's do it." And so now he's in my garage with me, right? Or we're in his apartment, and so we're just building this thing. And like we get to an early version of it, and this was the big difference for me and my previous startups, kind of that got the early success. It goes back to those networks, right? Had I not been in Atlanta, it would have been really hard for me to find someone that wrote code, electrical engineer. Like that's where my network was. Like I could go on the Georgia Tech's campus and call people and talk to people, talk to professors, like whatever I needed was in Atlanta. But not just on that perspective, but also when we had machines to build. I did, my younger frat brother was having a going away party when he graduated. I was like, "Can I bartend your party?" Just to get people to try it out and touch it, right? And even before we got to that point, inviting my friends over to the house that were also engineers, right? They have engineering degrees too, to like take a look at it and use it. And they're giving me feedback. Like, have you thought about doing it this way? Have you thought about, this type of pump? Or have you thought about doing it this way? And so by being like here in Atlanta, I had that kind of that support system, right? That everything that you need around you. My parents were here, so right, having a child and needing to do those random events, at the blink of an eye. I had a place like, "Hey, Mom, I'm about to drop my kid off. Like, can you watch him?" Like, you don't have that when you're like not in your support area. And so that's really what allowed me to like have that early success, because that's what we're missing a lot of times as Black entrepreneurs. We don't even know if an idea can be big because we never get a chance to get that first yes or no, that first big yes or no. Right. And so it actually turned out that we did a couple of bridal showers and a couple, like we had the machine. We only had one, but we had it everywhere. That joint was in my back seat, and we was pouring drinks for anybody who wanted to drink. And so another techie, my friend Candace, she was starting a company called My Havana. And so she was having a launch party, and she happened to be at Tim's going away party. And she was like, "Hey, can you bring that machine that you had at Tim's over to my launch party?" I literally called in work, was like, "Hell yeah, I'm not going to work today. Like, I'm about to pull up." And that's where we got our first investor, was at that event. Right? Like, so those networks and those that connective tissue, like, is really what you need, right? Like, starting something where you don't have that support system, where you don't have that connective tissue, it gets really, really difficult. And it's not saying that you're going to survive if you're in that environment, but the chances of you surviving go up tenfold. And that's why a lot of people, like Black people, just need to move to Silicon Valley. And it's like, no, we don't have that connective tissue. You know, Mom Duke's not in Silicon Valley, right? Like, my people not in, like, it may be some smart people out there, but my people not out there.
Right.
Right. Like, I don't have people I can call on to go get some shit done. And so that don't work for everybody. Right. And so that's really what made the difference of that. Now, as you go, if we can get deeper into the story, but that early success, it was really about having that support system in Atlanta.
I got you. So, Monsieur is a success. I mean, just to let viewers know, it was technology that you built that basically made mixed drinks or cocktails. So I remember going to a Hawks game and seeing it one time there. And I was like, I think I was with Fred or Jonathan. And he was like, yo, that's Barry's machine. And I was like, what? That's crazy. And I'm like, reading that it was the technology's being used at Churchill Downs. So you have these large venues and Regal Cinemas before the pandemic, movie theaters selling alcohol. So that's very impressive. So you take your success from Monsieur and you move on to your next thing. So now I want to talk about Collab and what you and your managing partners have been doing, working with Jewel Burke-Solomon, as well as your other partner, Justin Dawkins. So you guys have built, which is basically a venture capital or providing capital for startups. I'm new to this and just learning how big the tech industry is in Atlanta. And I think I told you this over the phone. One of my good friends, Nisha Butler, former basketball standout at Georgia Tech, she was starting her own startup. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've seen, what she's had to do to get investors, to get venture capital, to get the money just to launch her idea, and how hard it's been and grueling. You have some wins, you have some losses. I've also witnessed her being in these accelerator programs to where it's helped get her to the next step or some type of growth within her company or her business. So, between Collab and then you're also the managing director for Techstars, which is working with Cox Enterprise and Accelerator to help minorities who have startups. So talk about both of those and how you're trying to help Atlanta and this whole Atlanta ecosystem, just seeing like the startups, Fortune 500 companies we have in Atlanta, and why this is the perfect location for both of your ventures that you're doing right now.
Yeah, and so much stuff piggybacks on my life has just been like these building blocks, right? And the reason that we started Collab is because, just to put it frank, like Monsieur wasn't the success that it should have been, right? Like, we went out and we struggled to do the things. They tell you like hit this mark and you're like, or here are the things you need to do to get money, or here are the things you need to do to get a Series A round. And you go out and you hit all those marks and then you get nothing. It's crickets, right? Like, I watched white founded companies with way less traction than I had go out and raise $25 million when I couldn't raise $5 million. And I ended up being forced to sell my company because we didn't have enough capital to do what needed to be done for us to grow and scale. Like, at every level of business, there's a certain, especially in this game, there's a certain amount of money you really need to get to that next, especially dealing with hardware. Hardware is extremely expensive to do. And so through that journey, Jewel went through a similar thing. Justin went through a similar thing where, we just couldn't get the support, and Atlanta's ecosystem really wasn't built when we were coming up. Okay. Right. Like, it was just getting off the ground. There really weren't a lot of big success stories, especially for Black people. And so that's how we all became really good friends through that journey of kind of just learning about each other's journey. Same thing with Candace, same thing with Ryan up at the Gathering Spot, Joey Womack from Goody Nation. All these people now, they're like old heads in the Atlanta ecosystem. Like, we were all just trying to figure that shit out together. And we just came to the conclusion that at the end of our journey, like, we wanted to build something that the next generation of Black founders, they weren't going to have to go through all that bullshit, right? We were going to provide something to them that allowed them to start on our backs, like where we finished, and not have to start from where we started. And so we just dug in. It started off as like mentorship and advisement. And no matter how much we helped the startup, the fact of the matter was, even with our networks, we couldn't get them funded. we couldn't get them that first angel check that allowed them to go build the technology and move on blue and basically go through the process that most of these white founders have the ability to do. And so we were like, okay, well, people trust us. We have the notoriety. We have the experience. Like, we have the pedigree. What if we went and got the money and, you know, raised the money, and then we could only invest in Black people? Man, not one person we told that idea said it was a good one, right? It's like, wait a minute. You about to go try to raise a fund and only invest in Black people? It's like, you sure you don't want to say minority? You sure you don't want to say people of color? You sure you don't want to say underrepresented? Like, make it about geography and say you're going to invest in these 10 cities where a lot of Black people live, and then you can just invest in Black people anyway. And it was basically all these ways to say, you can say something and then go do what you really want to do. But if you just say you're going to invest in Black people, you're not going to be successful. And this isn't coming from white people.
This comes from Black,
right?
Oh,
this comes from Black people, yeah. And they're like, dude, or not dude, but to Jewel as well. Like, y'all are barking up the wrong tree. Like, just say y'all have a minority fund, and then if y'all only invest in Black people, then that's just what it. And we were like, no, we are intentional. Not only do we want our investors to know that we're only investing in Black, we don't want to pull the wool over anybody's eyes, right? But more importantly, we want Black founders to know that someone is out here being intentional on their behalf, right? And so we were, from day one, we were even so bad. We were like, we only want Black investors. Like, we don't even want, like, we were like, we only gonna write checks to Black people, and all the people that write checks to us are gonna be Black. Like, that was a little absurd. I mean, that was a little extreme. But I mean, that's just how intentional we were. It was like venture capital has been going on for 60, 70 years, right? The investment's been going on forever, but venture capital is like 60, 70 years old. And we're just like, if they haven't let us in yet, it's not like the data doesn't exist. It's not like people don't know the disparities. It's not like people don't talk about it every day. They just don't give a damn.
Right.
And so if we don't take a stand and do something for ourselves, then we have to make ourselves known. This is what all of our, our older generations have done, right? It's like, we didn't want to have a Black baseball league. It's not like we start off wanting to have a Black version of the NBA. Right? It was like they were forced. Like, we had to have our own Black neighborhoods and Black Wall Streets and Auburn Avenues because they made us. And honestly, we felt like in this situation, it's not as extreme. Obviously, we can drink from water fountains and stuff, but they forced us into a corner. They weren't going to do anything about it. Like, Silicon Valley was not going to fix this issue. Atlanta needed to fix the issue, and we needed to do it in a very intentional manner. And so we just started on this journey, and we started off raising a $10 million fund. And even that was like extreme. It was like, y'all not gonna raise $10 million, right? We're investing in Black people. We get a couple of intros. We start putting it out there to what we're doing. And the coolest part about what we're doing, and I know we have a lot of time, so I won't get into the intricacies.
No. It's all on you. Keep going, Barry. It's all on you. We need to hear this.
There are a couple of types of documents that people invest with, right? This thing called a safe note, especially for early stage investing. This thing called a safe note is a thing called a convertible note. There are a couple of other like less used versions, but safe and convertible. Those are like documents that were created out in Silicon Valley by law firms out in Silicon Valley. And we were like, you know what? The terms don't even work for Black people, right? Like, nor do they work for Black investors. So if we want to get Black investors involved, we want to invest in Black and allow for more successful Black founders. We got to change everything, right? Like, we can't do the same thing because some of it is not racist, or a lot of it is not racism. A lot of it is just inherent, like, bias built into the way the networks work, the way the documentation works, right? And so if that's the case and we really want to make a change, we have to do something different. And so this is probably the thing I'm most proud of what we're doing. I mean, I'm proud of everything, but we have a all Black law firm that we use, Townsend and Lockett.
Nice.
The only all Black law firm I know of. I'm gonna say I know you're not the only one, but here in the South,
right,
that focuses on this type of work.
Yeah, you don't. We work. You don't have.
We don't have many
doing this type of work.
And I mean, they're all Black. Like, they have a bunch of different versions or a bunch of different verticals in their practice, and basically a bunch of Black attorneys from big firms all left their big firms and started their own. So
that's brilliant. That's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Super proud of them too. But what I was saying was, we developed an entirely new investment vehicle called a space agreement. Black people don't like. They're like, and our goal is for this to be the future of early stage investing. And so not only do we have this fund, but we started working on an investment methodology, right? That's different than what Silicon Valley has done. And so that's really what started to get us some momentum. So we started preaching about this new way of investing that was more flexible than the binary version of what Silicon Valley has. And we got introduced to somebody at Kaufman, which is like a huge Kaufman basically trains investors.
Okay.
Like many of the Silicon Valley investors are Kaufman fellows.
Okay.
So this is like a big thing. And they were our first check-in. Like they helped us develop, they kicked the tires and everything. And it's because they believed in our model. They understand that traditional venture capital has a lot of gaps to it. And they saw us as the people that had the good answer to fix it. And so, man, that went from we're raising the 10 million to we really need to raise 25 because that gives us the capital to really run the play that we want to run. So we went from a $10 million fund, everybody telling us we can't do it, don't do it, to meeting Kaufman, bumping it up to a $25 million fund, to hitting that point, and then saying, you know what, there are a lot of people that want to like really get into this fund, to now we have a $50 million fund ran by all Black managing partners with a Black law firm that's behind it. And we only invest in Black entrepreneurs. And we haven't like did the announcement of all the people in the fund, but like when we start running this announcement this summer, or once we go through all our PR and all that stuff, like man, the journey that we started in 2018 to get here in 2021,
3 years,
and have I mean, it's nuts. And I mean, like we've already made 3 investments. We're probably gonna do another 3 within the next couple of months. And I mean, we're putting real money. And I want to clarify this, what you said, just because I think it's really important. We're not helping founders get capital.
Okay.
We are giving the founders capital.
Right. Yeah, that I'm learning it.
Right. Like, yeah. So we are writing $500,000 checks into early stage startups with Black founders. Okay. We have the ability to write $1 to $2 million follow-on checks when those companies are doing well. We have the ability to lead rounds and do things solely for Black founders that typically they had to go to Silicon Valley to get. Right. Not saying you couldn't get it in like Atlanta. We have investors here. So we do have I raise money here in Atlanta, right? There are pockets, you know, down in Miami and other places, but it's just a big deal, right? And it took me a while to like get to, because I'm super humble and like I don't really like to talk about everything, but like we're looking back on it now that we're getting to the close of the fund and raising the full 50 million. We'll probably actually go over 50. It's like, no, we got to talk about this, right? It's like, no, what we did is impressive, and I'm not gonna toot my horn for a long time, but for a couple months though, we're gonna scream from the mountaintops, because I mean, it's just it's an amazing thing, and hopefully this will spur. It doesn't even have to spur, right? Because it's not just us. We have Lightship Capital up between Cincinnati and Miami with Brian and Candace Rakeen. You know, they have a fund focused on diversity and geography, right? We have my buddy who I went to middle school with, actually, Nazir, up in DC with Zeal. We got Austin and AJ in LA. I mean, it's a bunch of these funds starting to pop up. It's like, we're about to take a stand, and we're going to make sure this next generation of minority founders, obviously we focus on Black, but many other folks on minority, but we're going to make sure, and it's a lot of women focused funds out there as well. You know, Valor VC here in Atlanta. Like it's a bunch of these funds that are just like, we're not taking this shit no more. Like, we're going to build the infrastructure we need, and we're not waiting on Silicon Valley to fix it anymore, because you failed. Like, the most innovative place in the world couldn't figure this out. That's not true. They didn't want to figure it out.
They didn't want to figure it out.
They figured out everything else.
Everything else is broken when it comes to Blacks in this country, with the system being broken. Yeah. So, like, when you guys are looking for startups that you want to invest in, what are you guys looking for, essentially? I know you're looking for companies that are successful. I mean, that would be, but what stage? I mean, do they have to be profiting a lot, or do you just see an idea that you think can grow if it had the right investments or the right backing behind it?
Yeah, so good question. And so technically we describe it as post-product early revenue.
Okay.
So that being said, we want to see that you can build something, right? Like we may not be that very, very first check-in. Now, we have some other things that we can help you with and resources we can share with you, but we want to see that you can get some early version of what you're doing off of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
And then we want to see that you talk to a couple customers about it, right? Like, and so when I say early revenue, we hope that you make some money. Even if you have a good solid pilot going, or you've had, 100 people download your app
Right.
and you have some feedback and you can kind of show us that you're learning, because that shows that you have the ability to execute. So you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to have all the answers, but we do want to see that you have that grit and that you can go out and do a little bit. And then from there, it's really all founder, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we do have a couple of industries or verticals that we talk about. So the future of work, the future of care, and the future of education, because these are things that really affect our community. And
Mm-hmm.
so we do want to try to make sure not only are we investing in Black founders, but that when those founders are successful, that there's still some residual positive effect on our community as well when we help those companies be successful. And so with that, we will invest outside of that a little bit, but that's kind of our thesis. That's where the majority of everything will be. But most of it, I say all that, but 80% of it is that damn founder.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when I sit down and talk to you, and this is one of the cool things about being an operator as an investor,
Mm-hmm.
I know that feeling, right? I've been there before. I've
Mm-hmm.
been on the other side of the table, and you can sense when somebody like is really in it, right? You can sense
Mm-hmm.
when they got that I'm gonna run through every fucking brick wall. I'm gonna swim across the ocean, like I'm gonna, whatever it takes. Like, I'm gonna make this thing. I'm gonna, like, even if we're not successful, it's not gonna be because I didn't give it my all. It's gonna be because the
Right.
market changed, or but and everybody's not gonna be successful. But those are the type of founders that we want to back. And it's because, very similar to my real estate startup, many people aren't successful in their first, but I want to know you when you start number two. That one, when you hit a couple bumps, I want to be the first investor. And I learned this from Marlon Nichols, and also the firm out in Oakland base with Eric and Kirby.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all three Black venture capitalists. But yeah, Eric and Kirby and Marlon, they told me, like, a lot of times I get in early on the deal. Even if I want to have confidence in it, but I'm investing in the founder because they're going to go do something else and something else. And I want to make sure that I'm in that person's network. So when they do go do number two, because I know they're awesome. Like, I know they're dope.
Right.
And eventually they're going to strike gold on something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I just want to make sure I'm in the room for all those conversations. And so that's the way we look at it too. Like, we're going to invest in founders. Every company's not going to be successful, but we want to make sure that the right people are being backed. And so as a founder, you have to show that grit. We met with one company and the guy was like, we asked him why he was doing it. He was like, man, I'm going to get my Lambo. It was like, next meeting. Appreciate you. Like, if that's it, if that's what you riding on, like, you going to quit so fast. Like, that's all you care about. Like, and so we look for people to have that passion. And, but we are an early stage investment firm.
Okay. So, like, let's talk about what you're doing with Techstars.
Yep.
With the accelerator that you run, or you're the director of. So, like, what are you looking for with, someone who's trying to make that next leap and has a startup? What type of applicants are you looking for your accelerator?
Yeah, so Techstars is a little different, right? So Techstars, I have companies that don't even have a product in the market yet, right?
Mm-hmm. And
so I'm really focused. So at Techstars, the adage is team. The 6 things we look for are team, market, traction, and then the idea, right? So you have 5 things in front of whatever idea you have. And the adage there is, even if you have a great idea, and even if you have a little bit of traction on that idea, that doesn't mean that the market's big enough, right? It doesn't mean that, and that idea, or if the market's big enough, that doesn't mean you're always going to keep that idea, right? You're going to have to pivot. Right. You might have a product that you think is the end all, but maybe it's not. Maybe you get into that market, get a couple customers, and like, people don't know, but Slack was a video game company.
Oh,
like the $1 billion company Slack, they were a video game. They made video games. Oh, and when the video games weren't working, they built an internal communication software that everybody loved, and they started selling that, and that became Slack, right? Like, so shit changes. So that's why I'm betting those first 3. Team. Because if you know how to get shit done, like, maybe your idea doesn't work, maybe you got some traction, but the market's not there. Like, we can try to massage that and figure some of that out, and maybe it doesn't end up working. But now at least I know I have this team. Right. Maybe that team, I even hired them to go work at another startup that I invested in, right? Maybe I have another startup I invested in, and the CTO and this team over here that failed is super dope. And now that their company is closed, I'm like, hey, you need to come work over here, right? I got another opportunity for you right here. And so it's about having those dope people around. And so that's what I look for at Techstars. But the other thing is we are a vertical based program.
Okay.
So I run the social impact program. And so we focus on things that have a positive impact on underrepresented demographics, underserved communities, and environmental sustainability.
Okay.
Now, I heard you earlier say like we don't focus on minorities.
Okay, you don't.
Like I can have a class. I can have a class of all white males, right? Like I don't have any diversity focus. I have a diversity focus, right? The program doesn't have a diversity focus, and that's one of the reasons that they brought me in. That we're running this program in Atlanta is because this is like you look at my classes, and I don't do anything based on if you're Black you get in, or if you're Latino you get in. I'm going to invest in the 10 best companies that are in my group. It just so happens that when you actually open up applications and you actually look in different places, that 8 out of those 10 top people might be people of color, right? And this is the opportunity that a lot of other people are missing against. My first 2 classes out of 20 companies, 16 of them have been minorities, with 15 of them being Black, right? And so we had one white woman founder who's killing it right now out of Atlanta, Jen Graham, Civic Dinner. She's a boss. But yeah, like most of my class, I've only had, out of 20 companies, I've only had 2 companies with only white male founders.
Wow. So the top
and it's not
a little bit. Yeah.
And it's not because I'm like giving other people like access that other people don't have. It's just that when you come to my program, you're not getting none of that other benefit. I don't give a damn about your network. I don't care where you went to school. I don't care if you got a Harvard degree or a Stanford degree or whatever everybody else looking for. I'm going to meet you as a person. I'm going to look at your idea. I'm going to see what your team looks like. And I run my shit on merit based, right? Like I'm an athlete, right? You're not getting that. Like either you can do the job or you can't, right? I don't give them what color your skin is.
Yeah.
It just so happens that if you actually pay attention, a lot of the people that can do the job, and this whole pipeline thing is a farce. Like that's some bullshit. Like you actually dig deep, you'll find out that these founders of color, these women founders, they some bosses, and you give them a shot. Like you gonna make some money off of them as an investor. And so that's how I run my Techstars program. Like I said, we focus on social impact. I invest everywhere from no product to very early product because of the terms. Like I'm not gonna get a super late stage company. So it is a very early stage investment. Once again, it's a 3-month accelerator, 13 weeks, and we go through hell. Like I said, you're gonna do 3 months, but it's gonna feel like 2 years. We're gonna move fast. We're gonna make a lot of introductions. We're gonna make sure you're in the right rooms. We're gonna make sure we help you hire the right people, whatever it takes. But the goal is to come out of that program like ready to go to the next stage of your business, whether that's with a bunch of customers, whether that's raising your next venture round, whatever the case may be. I just help the companies prepare to get to that next stage. And it really fits me well because I care about doing things right. And so running the social impact program, it just fits me very well. And that's why I'm so passionate about it. And now I get to do these 2 things that focus on the industry I love, which is technology and investing and founders. But I also get to make a positive impact on our country and our world while also making a positive impact directly in our Black community. And so I'm just like a kid. Even though I work a lot, I'm like a kid in a candy store every day.
Because you loving what you do. And that's a whole different ball game when you love what you do. All right. Yep. So Barry, I like to end in my interviews with my guests with the talk that talk questions. I call them the triple TQs. So I'm just going to ask you these 3 questions, and off the top of your head, you just give me your response. All right.
Oh, this got me nervous. You should have sent these to me an email. I'm nervous now.
I'm not going to set up anything like, what are you doing in the dorm and tech back in? Nah, we ain't going to do that. So what advice would you give an aspiring Black entrepreneur of a startup who's afraid to make the leap from maybe a 9 to 5 to doing their own thing because of the lack of investment or venture capital that they think they could get for a new startup or a business?
If you do the right things while you're at that 9 to 5, you won't be worried about making, or you shouldn't be worried about making the leap. One, I know that you have that worry because in the past, but there are resources out there now that if you do what you're supposed to do, and when I say that, don't do the stuff I do in my real estate company, right? Like don't, like go build your product, go find, if you're not technical, go find a CTO, like go to the Georgia Tech's campus or go online and look for technical people, get a product, like even if it's not great, like get something going before you quit that job. Like before I quit Caterpillar, I got accepted into TechCrunch Disrupt, right? Like, I had a whole machine built. Like, I worked that job until it was time for me to quit, right? And so that's why I tell you, do the stuff you're supposed to do. And when you quit, it won't feel like a risk. It will feel like more of a risk staying than it is leaving. And that's when you know that you have to go, and you feel like you're leaving opportunities on the table by going to that job, that 9 to 5 every day. But until that point, don't just quit and say, I'm about to go start a company, right? And then you looking up for a year, you calling me like, why didn't you give me no money? It's like, 'cause you ain't built shit, right? So that's why, long advice, but just do what you're supposed to do and make the right decisions while you're at that job, and make sure you're intentional about your decisions and you have a focus. And if you're ready, when you're ready to come out, there are resources today that were not there in 2012, you know, when I was starting my journey, 2010, when I started my journey, right? So the resource, so don't be scared of that part. We're here, we're out here, we're ready to support.
Good, good. So long term, what impact do you envision that Collab Capital and what you're doing with Techstars, what impact do you hope that it has on the Atlanta ecosystem and the Black economy?
Yeah, so my long-term view is that we build the foundational elements here in Atlanta for the Black tech community, not just for Atlanta, but just that we're trying to build the hub here for Black founders, but we're trying to build that foundation that was built in Silicon Valley before Black people could vote.
Right.
They started, you know, they built that venture capital foundation in, you know, 1960s, right? Like before Black people could go vote, you know. So we're doing that same thing in Atlanta. And we know that we're on a 60, same way they were on a 60, 70 year journey. Like, we're on a 30, 40, 50, 60 year journey, and we're here for the whole ride, right? But we have to build out those foundational elements. And so when we look long term, we look at Atlanta as a place, when you're a Black founder, you should start running into, you know, your cousin that started a company 20 years ago and now got a little bit of capital, right? Yeah. You should run into, you know, your friend that your dorm mate in college, you know, their uncle started a company and his uncle got a little cash. So you start, we just want to increase those touch points so that now more people have opportunities and they're not just depending on the big venture capitalists. Because that early money is really the most important money. That's the money we're missing. We can't even make it to the point where venture capitalists like wants to look at us because we can't get those. It's kind of like having word, right? We worry about graduation. If you don't have a word, right, they got the word. So we're trying to, you know, we're trying to build that early foundational tools and stuff. And long term, the reason I think Atlanta is the place to do it, you know, where did I come from? Milwaukee, right? Like Jewel is from Tennessee. And not saying we grew up here, but when you start looking at the tentacles of Atlanta's Black community, when we win in Atlanta, it's a win in Durham. It's a win in Jackson, Mississippi. It's a win in Birmingham. It's a win in Memphis. It's a win in Baltimore. It's a win in Jersey, right? Because so many people move here to find their success. When Black people move here, that when we win here, that success, unlike places like LA and New York, which I love, but typically that success stays there. When we have success in Atlanta, like that joint, it starts to spread back into these communities that also have high Black population centers. Like Jackson, Mississippi is like 85% Black, right? Like if we can, and it's the reason I say Jackson, there's a bunch of Jackson, Mississippi entrepreneurs here that are killing it right now.
That's what I was saying. I was like, Jackson, that's interesting.
Yeah, like we help them win, and we have a population of 85% of Black people. Like, imagine in 20 years, people moving to Jackson, Mississippi to start a tech company. Like, that's what we're building in Atlanta, right? Like, it starts here, but that's the ultimate vision, right? Like, you don't have to be in Atlanta, but this is kind of where the hub. This is where this is where we think it needs to start. And so that should be our leg. Same thing with voting, right? Like, those things are happening between Atlanta and Birmingham, but it matriculated throughout our whole country and changed history, right? Like, all these things that were happening here, they were happening here for a reason, but they matriculated and became history change, and that's what we're hoping to do right now with Collab.
Okay. Well, you just told me the legacy you want Collab to leave, but now I'm gonna ask you, what is the legacy that you want to leave for future generations?
Oh man, that would be. I'm so focused on all the other stuff. I don't really be thinking about me a lot of times.
At the end of the day, it's got to be a legacy, Barry.
So I'll say this. I told this to somebody, one of my mentees, I think the other day. Like, I don't do anything for like visibility. I'm not the person that gets an article and I'm like on Instagram posting every 2 weeks.
Right.
Like, it's so much shit that I do.
What you've been doing? Shoot, I'm just hearing about this in the interview.
Because I just like to do the work, and like I let the success speak for itself. I'm not out here looking for likes. I got like 2,000 followers. I don't care about none of that shit. I'm not trying to get to 50 and asking people to like. But one thing I told one of my mentees was, one thing I would like to see is, I would like to be in a textbook one day, right? And not because I'm vain and I want to be in the textbook. I want the impact that I make to be so big that people can't help but talk about it.
Right.
Like, where I don't want to write myself into the book, but I want to make such a big impact that when people talk about Atlanta and the Black wealth gap and how Black people were able to kind of pull themselves up, work together, collaborate, and build something special. Like when we look at we look 100 years from now, we look back like, how did we get here in 100 years? How did Black people become so prosperous? I wake up every day trying to make sure I have as big of an impact in that journey as I possibly can. And so that was what I was like, if there people are writing about me, if I'm like in a museum or something in 100 years, like if people talking about what I started back in 2010, like for me, that's the legacy I want to leave. And, you know, I don't need the flowers while I'm here. I don't need the vainness and all that stuff while I'm here, but I just want to have that level of impact, right? That people can't but include me in the history of the Black community, you know, canceling this damn wealth gap and all the other inequities that we have in this country today.
Well, I love it, Barry. I'm going to give you your flowers. I think it's well deserved. Just what I'm hearing in this conversation, it's amazing what you and your colleagues have been able to accomplish in such a short time, and just seeing a need, like the growth. I don't deal with startups. I'm new to this game, or just dealing in this realm, but just getting a better understanding, because I think it's so important. And we got to, you know, be informed. If we don't know enough, then we don't even know what's going on in our city or our backyard, and we can't grow as a community. So I really appreciate you coming on today and joining the podcast. This was a great interview.
Thank you for having me. Like I said, sorry it took so long.
Oh, no. Anytime. You know, I'm patient. I'll wait for the right ones. So I'm glad you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. You too. Peace.
All right. Peace. All right. Well, this is episode 20 of Talk That Talk. We're in season 2. We just had a great interview with Barry Givens. He did an excellent job just talking about what his ventures are doing and what he's doing in the Atlanta community. He talked about Collab Capital. They're doing great things and really trying to help Black startups and young startups that are in the near or early phases of starting up and looking for venture capital. But they're doing a great job in just trying to grow this community and giving the money or the investments to the right people to see that growth. So we have to continue to support Barry Givens and what he's doing, because when people are doing great things in the community, we always have to give our support. So I appreciate him jumping on the podcast this week. It was a great episode. And I hope my viewers and listeners get something out of this, because I think it's very important. So like any other time, I like to give the Black business shout out of the week. And this one is another one. We're going to do this one, do it well. We're going to shout out the Village Market ATL that's actually here in Atlanta, Georgia. This is a group that's really trying to help Black businesses really get their product out there in the community. Different entrepreneurs around the city or around the country that are selling great product may not have their products out in the storefront, but they have one at Ponce City Market. And I went there a couple of months ago, had a great experience, bought some products, and enjoyed myself, and thought, like, what other platform do you need? What a great platform to have to try and get Black entrepreneurs and their products out into the community and get them more notoriety and viewership. So they're really doing it. I suggest you go visit the Village Market at Ponce City Market, or go online, purchase some products, support this group because they're doing big things. The founder and CEO is Lakeisha Hallman. She's doing spectacular. She's actually a doctor, so she's doing some fantastic things with this venture and just trying to help the Atlanta community and really growing this base for Black entrepreneurs. But that's the shout out this week. If you want to follow the Village Market, you can go to their Instagram page, which is the Village Market ATL. Or if you want to go to their website, the website is simply thevillagemarketatl.com. So go check them out. And that is the Black business shout out this week. Again, this is episode 20. Great interview with Barry Givens. I appreciate everybody who's listening. Watching on YouTube, remember you can go to the social media platforms at Talk That Talk Fallon to see what we're up to. We're just getting things going again, 2 episodes into the new season. So please listen to old episodes if you haven't done so. We have 20. So they've all been great interviews or great discussions. And I love getting feedback from our listeners and viewers. But this is another one. Stay tuned for the next one. See you next time.